It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and here to talk about a great new CD that combines both music and storytelling is our good friend Jeannie Ewing. Thanks for being here, Jeannie.
Thanks for having me again, Kyle.
It's good to have you here. This is a little bit different than your past projects. We've talked about your books that you have released about grief and dealing with grief, but this is not a book. It's a CD that has both storytelling and music. I think this is a great idea. Where did the idea come from?
Well, it's kind of divine providence. So I went to speak at my friend Anna Nuzzo's parish in Wisconsin this past March. I stayed at her house, and she and I just kind of fiddled around with some songs that she had written but hadn't yet recorded. And I was just kind of sharing with her some snippets of what I thought were kind of really interesting life stories from what I'd experienced. And so we talked about it after I came home that day or the next day or whatever. And it just kind of materialized over maybe the course of 6 months. So from that initial conversation with Anna and meeting her and kind of getting to know her style of music, and I don't know, it was just in conversation from that point until 6 months later. That's when the CD came out. So it's interesting in the sense that I'm primarily an author, like you said, but when I went to speak to her group, she said, I really think you have a gift in speaking also, and I think we could combine our gifts and it would be more powerful as a presentation to other people. So the CD has, new songs from Anna and stories that they all relate to each other. So for instance, I have a story called Making Amends, in which I talk about my relationship with my younger brother and how it became very strained when he got older, then how it was healed through God's grace. And then she has a song that corresponds with that story called Windfall of Grace, about forgiveness and about healing in their family relationships. So we actually did this event live in Milwaukee a couple of weeks ago, and it was very well received. It was the first time we did it together. And most people that came up to us said, wow, I really loved the combination of stories and songs. That was very powerful. It was very moving. It was very inspirational. So that's why we're trying to promote this as a live event, because we want to reach more people.
So did you write the stories and then she would write songs based on them? Or was it just kind of like I already had these songs written and they match up well? Or what was the process?
So what happened was Anna would send me songs that she had written maybe even years ago, and I would just remember something from my life that just fit the song. So I would listen to the song, and then I would say, and I would just think, oh my gosh, I remember this. So for instance, she has a song, the St. Michael prayer song. Mm-hmm. So it's basically the prayer of St. Michael, but to music. And as I was listening to it, I remembered this incident from like 10 years ago when I almost died in a car crash, but I believe that my guardian angel and St. Michael had saved me. So I tell this story, and then she sings that song, the St. Michael prayer song. So that's just kind of how God worked in this. The Holy Spirit just moved through both her songs and then my memory, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I really like this idea. Do you remember VH1 used to do a show called Storytellers, and they would have these musicians, and they would tell the stories behind the songs and then play the songs. But the thing is, the musicians aren't necessarily great storytellers. This is like you've taken the best of both worlds. You've taken a good musician and a good storyteller and just said, look, you do what you do best and not try to do something that you aren't great at. So I think this is such a great idea. And one of the things that you say, like, I'm looking at the flyer right here, and it says, we all struggle with brokenness, grief, anxiety, loneliness, and suffering. If you just read that, this looks like a very depressing night. So why did you want to focus on these things, and then how are you spinning this to be positive and talking about the hope in it?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So you probably know, and some of your listeners may know, that I primarily am a grief writer. Mm-hmm. That's kind of my niche, I guess you could say. It's what God's just asked me to focus on. And so I don't necessarily focus on the depressing part of grief, but the reality of loss, and then how do you move through your grief to a place of healing and hope. And so Anna, if you hear her music, I believe that her voice is very anointed. She just has this ability, this gift to bring healing through song. And she's done that to me personally. There have been certain songs that have really touched my heart at points in my life where I've just felt very burdened or maybe discouraged or uncertain about something. And listening to her music brings a lot of peace to my own soul, and I've heard others say the same. So with this collaborative project, we felt that with the gift that she has of bringing this healing and peace through her songs, and I can tell these stories that are real and honest and authentic, like, this is life and it's hard, but here's how we can get through to the other side, and let's do it together. We just felt like that would be something that would speak to a lot of people because there's so much strife and division and anxiety and hopelessness, I guess, is the best word I can come up with in our world today. And even those of us who have faith, we still struggle on a daily basis, and we don't often know how to handle it. If we turn to the world just says, well, do what makes you happy, and we don't get a lot of deep answers. And so if we turn to the church, which Anna and I, our faith influences everything that we do, especially this ministry, we feel that through the church and through what we have come to understand through our faith, that we can reach other people who are in that place of struggle and hopelessness and despair.
So why the title Amazing Mercy?
That's actually one of her tracks. That's one of the songs that she wrote.
And can you explain what that song is about?
Well, Anna has a very strong devotion to the Blessed Mother and also to the Divine Mercy devotion. And so this song talks about when we are suffering, and it could be because of sin, and it could be because of someone else who has hurt us. She says, your amazing mercy, it just pours over me. Jesus pours out his amazing mercy upon me. So that's not exactly the lyric that she has, but that's the gist of the message of her song.
So then what story do you pair with that?
I have a story about when I was pregnant with our middle daughter, Sarah. It was very late in my pregnancy, and I had a third ultrasound because my physician was concerned that I was measuring too big. And so when I was getting this ultrasound, the tech was just really, she said, you might want to be ready for having this baby any minute. And I was like due in a month. And so this was the first time I was kind of rattled about my pregnancy. Otherwise, it was very pleasant and joy-filled and everything. And I came home and I looked at that picture of Sarah, and I just had this gut feeling, like a mother's intuition, that something was wrong. So I woke up the next morning, because I had had a very restless night, worrying about what might be wrong with the baby. And the Lord spoke to me very clearly, which doesn't happen very much. But I remember I was very jolted because Jesus said very clearly, do you trust me with the child within your womb? And he asked me 3 times. And I remembered the story where he asked St. Peter, do you love me? Then feed my sheep. And so I was thinking, okay, this must be really important if Jesus is asking me 3 times, do I trust him? So in this story, as I'm telling the story, I'm relating it to how I felt that God was preparing me for what we were going to go through with Sarah, who has a rare disease, and she has 15 specialists right now. And so when I looked in retrospect after we had Sarah and I was really struggling with her diagnosis, I remembered that Jesus had said this to me. He spoke to my heart, maybe 2 months before that particular incident. And I just realized how much he loved me and how much his mercy was enveloping me in that moment and in that journey with Sarah.
So this is just a sample of some of the storytelling, and we haven't even sampled the music, but where should we send people to be able to hear samples of it and to learn more about it?
So you can go to my website, which is jeannieewing.com, or you can go to Anna's website, which is annanuzzo.com, ANNANUZZO.com.
Yeah, and on Anna's website, or I think this is her website that I'm looking at, that has the samples, and you can hear the music and hear samples of some of the storytelling as well. So check that out. Again, we're talking about Amazing Mercy, which is I'll call it a duet of music and storytelling of Anna Nuzzo and Jeannie Ewing, who's joining us today talking about this. And this idea of mercy and hope, especially within tragedy and suffering and grief. What is your goal of the person that either listens to the CD or that would come to a live event?
I would think, I guess I imagine this person carrying their own baggage, their own burdens, and maybe just not knowing what to expect, or maybe kind of being reticent, like, I don't know if I really want to be here, or I don't really want to listen to this. And then just being open, and then allowing the Holy Spirit to pour whatever grace He desires to give them, to impart to them. Because every person who's listened to the album, and I have some testimonials on my laptop that I put on Instagram and stuff, it's different for them. Their experience of the CD or of the live event, it's different for them, but similar in the sense that they all say that they're so glad that they were open to whatever message God wanted to give them. So I think what we have to remember, Kyle, is that healing is hard. So when we take that first step when we're struggling or suffering into the grief, it's painful because we know that working through it is not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be easy. And we're not really sure what God's going to ask of us as we journey with Him. And we want this album and this live event to be an accompaniment to people, almost like we're taking their hand, spiritually speaking, where we're saying, hey, it's okay, trust God. We're with you. We've been there too. And we want to share with you how God's worked in our lives through our brokenness, so that we can be in a place of healing and we can share that hope with you so that it can be possible for your life too.
Yeah. That image of it sometimes hurting to heal kind of thing makes me think of like a medical version of this. Anybody who has to have surgery to fix something that's wrong with their body, the surgery doesn't feel good and you might have some intense pain and recovery in the process of recovering, but in the end, you're stronger and better because of it. The same thing with our spiritual or our mental as with our physical.
Yes. So actually, I have a story on the album called A Face Only a Mother Could Love. Mm-hmm. And I talk about when Sarah was born and then how her face looked different and her first surgery. So you're talking about surgery, hurt to heal.
Yeah.
She was 6 months old and she had to have her skull cut open. And that was really hard. That was probably one of the hardest things I've been through as a mom.
Yeah.
My husband and I were sitting in the waiting room, the surgical waiting area, and just being in this helpless state, knowing that here's my baby, this innocent little baby who has to have this major, painful, difficult, risky surgery, and yet we knew it was going to save her life because her skull had been fused at birth, and so if she did not have the surgery, her brain would continue to grow, but her skull would not accommodate the space that she needed, and she could have brain damage and she could die. So we knew that this was necessary, and I think we have to, to relate that to our spiritual journey, we have to let God rip open our hearts sometimes in order for Him to patch it up and stitch it up to heal.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, it's called Amazing Mercy. It's an album. It's a live event. Check out JeannieEwing.com for more information about it. Thank you so much, Jeannie, for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kyle. Yep. Thanks a lot.